What's up guys, it's Aaron, and today we're going to be talking about an app that I launched and what I learned while launching it. So a couple of weeks ago I launched an app called overemployers.com. You can go and visit it right now, it's still live, to the Reddit community of r/overemployed. If you're not sure what that is, I'll give a bit of a backstory now. If you are sure what it is, you can skip that backstory in the description. So the overemployed movement is basically a group of people that are wage workers from 9 to 5, and they get a salary per year, and basically what they do is they have more than one job. So if you have more than one 9 to 5 job, you're essentially collecting 1, 2, 3, sometimes up to 5, sometimes very rarely up to 10 paychecks each pay period for doing the same amount of work. Now this group of people prides themselves on being able to, one, either fulfill all their contractual obligations within that 9 to 5 period for multiple jobs. So say an hour for each job or 2 hours for each job to finish that full 8 hours commitment that they gave their company. Now a lot of these people are able to do this and are very good at their job, which is why they're able to put in so few hours for each one. Now there's also a subset of those people who puts in just the bare minimum to not get fired, and that's its own camp within the overemployed community. So I don't personally overemploy, nor do I say that it's a good thing, but I'm a big fan of something called unbundling Reddit, which is something I learned about on Twitter. It's essentially the process of taking a growing subreddit and you make apps around a certain community that is growing that you have direct access to. So because this Reddit is public, the Discord is public, I can pick people's brains, I can see what they're thinking, I can ask them questions, and I can kind of get a much better idea of the users that I want to be using my product, which is why I chose the overemployed community. As you can imagine, this can have a really snowbally effect, and it can be a really great way to niche down a software product and really get into a community and get ingrained and become the backup for what people are going to use in terms of tools. What I wanted to do is create the go-to job finder application for people who want to overemploy. And so I said to myself, hey, how come I don't make the job board that can serve this community? If you aren't aware, job boards can be extremely profitable with extremely little amounts of work coming from the person who runs it or creates it. So originally the idea was to have startups and companies that are desperate for highly skilled employees come to the job board and be okay with people overemploying, because they would be fulfilling their job and their responsibilities that they're assigned, but the employer would just look the other way in terms of how many jobs they had. I soon discovered that this is actually a terrible idea because employers are very not okay with their employees overworking or having more than one job. And there are plenty of reasons for this, but the main one being that it feels unethical, unloyal, and like you're getting cheated out of paying someone from 9 to 5 when they're only working from 9 to 11 or 9 to 10, or maybe not at all. But then I had a great idea. What if instead of having employers come and post their jobs and pay to post their jobs to people that they don't want to hire anyway, I would aggregate job postings from all over the internet that would allow remote work. The overemployed people could vote on whether or not that company was good for overemploying at, whether or not they were fired from that company for overemploying, comment on things about that company, the work-life balance, the salary, etc. I figured that this could help build a platform for this small but growing community that didn't exist yet, that could become the go-to kind of platform for seeing, kind of like how levels.fyi, I'll link in the description, that's my go-to for software engineering to see all the salaries, who's hiring, things like that. But yeah, I thought it could be a really cool idea and just a really niche app that would be cool to see a bunch of people using. I wanted to finish the project and launch directly to the community quickly so that I could validate whether or not it was a good enough idea to sink even more time on. And the reason for this is that most apps fail, and that most people that put a lot of time into an app before they deploy it, it doesn't get the traction that they assumed that it would get, and they end up becoming bitter and not wanting to work on any projects because they thought that it would be a really sought after project, but they ended up just wasting their time because they didn't validate their ideas. Another reason for this is that if you've ever read the book, The Lean Startup, it talks about short feedback cycles where you basically want to build, measure, and learn as quickly as possible, and you iterate through that cycle as quickly as possible so that you don't waste any time building something that people don't actually care about. So the main game of startups is not building things people don't care about. It's building things that people want and that people care about. Because if you don't do that, nobody's going to use your product and nobody's going to pay you. So I ended up launching it a few days later, and here's what I learned. The main thing that I learned is that it's extremely important to spend as little time possible building out an idea before you validate it. You want to have the bare minimum in place so that your idea is there. So like you could vote whether or not you overemployed at a company, and you could vote whether or not you were fired at a company. You can see job postings, you can click on them to see the company and click to go through and apply to the job. That was the bare minimum for my project. And so we call that a minimum viable product, or MVP, if you're not familiar with that. But I'm extremely, extremely glad I did that. And it was a great learning because the OE community hated it. They hated the product that I built for a few main reasons. So the community hated my project, mostly for two reasons. The first one was that they thought it was a honeypot. Basically, they thought employers were putting this on so that they could track whoever would click through to apply to the jobs, and they would know who is overemploying in the tech community. This is definitely a valid fear of people who are overemploying, because they want to keep it as low-key as possible so they don't get caught or fired, because that's their livelihood. That's the money that's going into their bank account every week. And although this is a valid fear, I was able to put it to rest pretty quickly by explaining that I just aggregated jobs without permission from different APIs on the internet. So there was no tracking going on. I was essentially just taking links and metadata that had to do with these job postings from different sites. The second reason that they all hated it was because they really want to keep the community low-key. There's been calls to make the community on Reddit private and the Discord private because they don't want too many people doing this. And the reason for that is that if too many people do it, companies are going to have to start cracking down really hard on this, and it's going to become a lot harder for anybody to do it. So while it's nice to have, a lot of people in the community, it's going to be capped because people don't want others getting in on it, because in turn, then nobody will be able to do it, if that makes sense, which is also a very valid concern that I didn't think about at first. So that was the first thing I learned, that you want to maximize your time and be extremely efficient in terms of time and money when you're trying to validate an MVP. That way you don't waste any resources that you don't have to. The second thing that I learned is that it's okay to fail, and that I don't feel like it was a waste of time. I feel like I had a hypothesis and I created an experiment to test that hypothesis, and hundreds of people used it, and it turned out that my hypothesis was wrong. But I was able to put out a product quickly, I was able to engineer it efficiently, and if it was for a different community, it definitely could have worked, which is something that I take solace in. I also take solace in the fact that I was able to actually validate that people didn't like it. So I don't feel like I wasted my time, because I was able to stop my time from being wasted potentially in the future had I kept working on all the bells and whistles before I tried to release it. Also, I follow a few people on Twitter that are entrepreneurs, and it's really interesting to see how many failures people had before actually creating a product that made them money. I've seen as little as 10 to 12 and as many as 90 software failures before people actually started paying them to use their site or application, which is pretty nuts to think about, considering this was one project I did that took a couple weekends. So that's going to mostly be it for today's video, guys. I'm going to leave a link to my app in the description so you guys can check it out if you want. It's an Next.js with React app that uses AWS Cognito and PostgreSQL for its database. You can all check it out if you like. I really don't care that much because the community that's meant for it isn't going to use it. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope you learned from my mistakes and my successes in launching this product. Hope to see you all next time for the next video, and be sure to hit like and subscribe.